This is a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington. We are coming on the air with news about former President Donald Trump, as a jury in New York has found that Trump sexually abused and defamed E. Jean Carroll and awarded her $5 million in damages. This was a civil case there that went on for the past 2 weeks. It was a quick verdict. They just started deliberating this morning. The jury also finding that Trump did not rape Carroll, but that he is liable for battery and for defamation. Want to bring in Elaine Quijano, who is there and has been covering this trial. Elaine?
Well, Norah, it took this jury of 6 men and 3 women less than 3 hours to reach its decision against the former president of the United States, finding him liable, as you said, for sexual abuse and defamation. Now, E. Jean Carroll, the writer, had alleged that Donald Trump had raped her in a New York City department store dressing room in 1996. That is a claim that Donald Trump repeatedly denied. During the trial, Carroll had said that she was too shaken at the time to report that to police, something that Trump's defense attorney, Joe Tacopina, had questioned. That attorney also had pressed Carroll on why she could not remember the exact date of the alleged assault and suggested that she only came forward in order to sell more copies of her autobiography. Now, for his part, the former president had been given the opportunity to testify during this trial here and even suggested as recently as last week that he would cut his trip overseas short in order to do that. His attorney saying in closing arguments, though, after the former president declined to appear, his former attorney said he has no story to tell other than denying her claim. But Norah, as you said, a surprisingly quick decision by this jury. I can tell you that the instructions to the jury this morning from the judge were quite lengthy. It was 10 questions on this verdict form that the jury had to consider. Clearly, unanimity seemed to be something that was with this group from the start, given just how quickly this decision came.
Elaine Quijano, thank you. Yes, a remarkably quick verdict from this jury. And this is the first time in history that a former president of the United States has been found liable for sexual assault and battery. Former President Trump, as Elaine noted, did not testify. However, Roberta Kaplan, the attorney for E. Jean Carroll, said that Trump was a witness against himself, in part because of that defamation tape that many of us have seen, in which the president talked about not only the Access Hollywood tape, where he boasted in the past about grabbing a woman in her sexual parts, as well as confusing who E. Jean Carroll was. Remember, the defense of Donald Trump was that E. Jean Carroll was not his type. He wouldn't have raped someone like that. And yet this picture, when he was shown this picture, that's E. Jean Carroll there on the left-hand side. He thought it was Marla Maples, his ex-wife. He seemed confused when he was then pointed out, even by his own attorney, that no, that's the accuser, E. Jean Carroll. Then he said, well, it's blurry. But as Roberta Kaplan, the attorney, said, Trump lied. That picture wasn't blurry. Let's bring in CBS News legal analyst Ricky Kleeman. I know, Ricky, you have been covering this trial from the beginning. Your take about how this jury was able to deliberate so quickly.
Well, there was only really one question for this jury, Norah, and that was, did they believe E. Jean Carroll? And when you look at E. Jean Carroll's testimony, you're really looking at the testimony not only of one woman, you're looking at the testimony of 5 women. Because what you have is the plaintiff, E. Jean Carroll, and her story about what she says happened to her around 1996. But you're also looking at 2 what we call fresh complaint witnesses, people she told right at that particular time. And you're also looking with 2 other victims who told a very similar story, not only to E. Jean Carroll, but it is the story of the Access Hollywood tape. It's precisely the same story 3 times. So the worst witness against Donald Trump was Donald Trump, because they had the Access Hollywood tape, as you pointed out, and in his own deposition, it was really somewhat of a disaster when you have someone who says if you're a star, fortunately, you can do what I talked about. And those are the kind of statements where a jury could not possibly see that 5 women were lying. Real issue, Nora, for me, is how much money.
That's right. And as we're hearing right now, it could be about $5 million that the former president liable for. I do want to ask you, though, Ricky, they did find him not liable for rape, but they did find him liable for sexual battery. What does that mean?
Well, it could mean a lot of things, Nora. It could mean that there was a compromise in the jury room about what actually happened, about how they thought about her description. She was very, very emphatic about the use of finger and the pain that it caused. And a lot of her memories were about that finger. Now, in many jurisdictions, that kind of penetration of the vagina by a finger would also be considered rape. But perhaps this jury felt differently. There is no doubt that they saw and heard enough to say, well, perhaps it wasn't rape for all kinds of extraneous reasons. But nonetheless, they felt that one question down, they could find it a sexual abuse. They didn't go further down the list of the judge's lesser included offenses, as we lawyers would say. But sexual battery is a forcible touching plus more.
And Ricky, we should note, too, this is a civil case, not a criminal case. And so the burden of proof is different. Explain.
In a criminal case, the burden of proof is to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. That's a huge burden. As I often say on the scales of justice, it's right at the top of the scales that you would have to believe the evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you suspected, if you get, that wasn't enough. But in a civil case, the burden is preponderance of the evidence. Nora, that's like putting a feather on the scales of justice. It's about 51%.
It's an excellent way to describe it. Ricky Kleeman, thank you so much for your expertise. Want to bring in our chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. And Major, Donald Trump is running for president again. What is the political effect of this?
So not only is Donald Trump running for the Republican nomination, he's the front runner. He is right now the undisputed front runner. And by all polling data measured recently, a very, very strong likely Republican nominee. The political effect of this will come out over time, but this trial was in fact a character sketch of the former president. And his attorney said, you could say that former President Trump is rude and crude, but he didn't do these specific things. Also arguing, by implication, these would be out of character for the former president. The jury did not agree with that. The jury said, as a matter of fact, based on all the things presented to us, this is precisely the character. Now, those on the political side of former President Trump would say, you know what? That was adjudicated in the 2016 election. The country looked at this character sketch and said, you know what? It's okay. We'll elect him president. That character sketch now comes back with very real procedures in a legal courtroom and an assignment of a fine against former President Trump. So that character question now is raised in a very different context. And there's been a proceeding, an adversarial one, where Donald Trump had every opportunity to defend himself in person, looking at across that courtroom at Eugene Carroll. He did not do that. His attorneys did not want him to do that. So the character sketch that emerges from this civil proceeding will have real political impact.
Donald Trump's attorneys will no doubt appeal this particular ruling, but this is the first time that a jury has found a former president of the United States liable for sexual abuse and battery in this case. And as has been noted, this in many ways, in addition to a character test, this was also a matchup between two different types of attorneys, where Donald Trump didn't show up. Joe Tacopina, his attorney, didn't present much of a defense. And in fact, really the only evidence out there was Donald Trump's own deposition, which ended up being quite damning.
As Ricky Kleeman pointed out, the former president said, fortunately or unfortunately, but that fortunately word hangs out there predominantly. Fortunately, for years and years, the former president said millions of years, it clearly wasn't that long, men have been allowed to get away with this. Fortunately?
By grabbing a woman,
Yes. in an unwanted, battery-type, aggressive way.
He almost admitted to it.
Precisely. And in 2016, I remember it well. I covered it hour by hour by hour. It was still kind of an abstraction. Oh, he talks this way. He said it was locker room talk. He would never act this way.
The Access Hollywood tape.
Yes. That's not the context any longer. A jury looking at all the facts said, no, that probably did happen. Was it rape? We have no way of knowing that for sure, but we know something bad. Something unwarranted and unwanted, unwelcome happened. And then the former president lied about it. That's the defamation part of it. Oh, and to compound the factual inaccuracies perpetuated by this former president, this morning on social media, he said he was unconstitutionally silenced in this proceeding. That is a complete lie. He was given every opportunity. The judge provided 3 more days in case the former president wanted to testify. That's not unconstitutional silencing. That is a strategy that failed.
It really is an interesting case in many ways because the attorney, Roberta Kaplan, for E. Jean Carroll, who is quite skilled, pointed out that Trump lied multiple times. He had said, I never met E. Jean Carroll, but then there was the picture, and then he confused her with his ex-wife, Marla Maples. Trump said, well, I'd never been to Bergdorf Goodman's, the department store in New York. And Roberta Kaplan said, well, he lied because we've got someone testifying that he frequently visited the store. Trump lied when he said that the photo was blurry. Here, look at the photo. It's quite clear. Anybody can see there. It's a clear picture. So it was, again, in many ways, saying that Trump cannot be believed in this case. And that is usually, it's usually sometimes the one who makes the accusation is not believed.
Precisely. The forcefulness of the former president's denials evaporated up against all of his other misrepresentations and inaccuracies and strategic lies.
Major Garrett, thank you. And just to recap, a jury in New York has found former President Donald Trump liable for sexual abuse and defamation in a civil case, awarding the former columnist E. Jean Carroll nearly $5 million in damages. I want to thank Elaine Quijano and Ricky Kleeman. Our coverage will continue on CBS News Streaming, your local news, and we're going to have a full wrap-up of what this all means tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Norah O'Donnell in Washington.
Now is always on.
Get the Channel 3000 app, activate the push alerts, and we will send you breaking news, traffic, and weather alerts as it happens.
The Channel 3000 app. Get it now.
Powered by News 3 Now.